Hey folks, it's Jennifer. Thanks for stopping by once again. Today's video actually shows two techniques. One is how to create a shaped card using a border die, and the other is how to add sequins, some fun ways to do it, to layer them, and also the best way to kind of handle them and adhere them. So this is the first shaped card. It's got the little angle, the curve on the sides. I'll also show in this video a new embossing pattern that I found that has a lot of depth to it. And here's the second card. It has a scallop border, but the rest of it is pretty similar. So for these cards, I actually wanted to have a thick white textured cardstock, so I decided to use watercolor paper. Now if you've watched any of my videos, you know I love the Tim Holtz watercolor paper that's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That paper is the exact same as this Ranger watercolor paper. It's the same paper. This is 8 1/2 by 11, so you can make cards out of this. So even though I'm not using watercolor, I wanted the texture of this watercolor paper, so I'm just going to use it as my card base. So I'm putting a score line at 5 1/2 inches. I don't use a scoring board. I just think it's a tool you don't need because you can use the little ledge in your paper trimmer instead. So I went ahead and cut it to 4 1/4 wide, and now I'm going to use my bone folder to just make sure that this is nice and creased, and there we have a note card. Now if you have frayed edges when you do a trimmer, you can just use a sanding block to smooth it off. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a shaped card. We're actually going to do 2 of them. I have these new border dies from Pretty Pink Posh. There is a zigzag, a scallop, and a curve, and they all have the little stitch lines in them. So when you cut them, you'll have a little nice finished stitch or faux stitched edge that is just really eye-catching and very different. So I'm going to take this, and I have a piece of painter's tape here, just 2 little pieces to tape in place, and this is right along the edge of my card. I'm going to go ahead and put this between my cutting plates on my Big Shot here. Any die cut machine would work, and run it through. Now remember, this is a really heavyweight cardstock, and I'm trying to cut through 2 layers, so it might not cut all the way through, but that's okay. On the next card, I'm going to show you a trick in case you need to run it through a second time. But here, this pretty much cuts through. I just kind of tore the edge there, but that's okay. It didn't hurt my card. I'll just take a my scissors to smooth that out once I'm done here. So now I'm going to tape it in place to do the other side of my card too. I thought this was a unique card design where the sides kind of curve out, just something different. So now that I have my 2 sides cut, I can go in with my scissors and just smooth out the sides, and there we have our shaped card ready to go. Very quick and easy to do. Something fun and different. I don't know, I get tired of making the same thing all the time. Okay, now for the other card, I have this scallop border. You can see the stitch lines that this has. I'm just going to go ahead and right up to the edge of my card. I put it as close as I can to the edge of the card because I want the card to be as wide as possible. I don't want a super narrow card. And I'm going to go ahead and run this through the die cut machine. When I brought it out the other side, I realized that this did not cut all the way through. However, it did inspire me for one of my future cards. I'm going to do a card where the front has a scallop edge, but the back side is solid. So that's another card design. But I will come back and show you how to fix this right now because it did cut through partially. But let's go ahead and do the other side first. I'm going to take my die right up to the edge as close as I can get and go ahead and run this through my machine also. Okay, so now we have our 2 sides that need to be fixed on the inside. The front cut through, but not the inside, so I'm going to open up my card and put it on my cutting plate. Now here's the easy thing. When you take your die and place it right in, it kind of fits in the groove that was partially die cut there. It kind of pushed into the paper, so it just pops right into the groove on the paper, so you know exactly where to put it. Go ahead and tape it in place and run it through your die cut machine again. By the way, many people have been asking about the magnetic platform plate. I do use that on my Vagabond, so in a future video I'll show you how to use that magnetic plate. But on here I'm just taping the pieces in place. So there, we fixed that one side. Very easy to do, and you have that faux stitching on the inside and outside of the card. So I'm going to line it in right here. It just pops right into place once again, and run it through my die cut machine again. This is just a fun way to make a shaped card from any border die that you may have. There are lots of border dies out there, and they're a little bit more expensive than others sometimes because it's a bigger piece of metal, but this is a great way to get more out of those dies. I'm just going to use my scissors here just to round those corners off, and there we have a fun little shaped card. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our greeting on these. I'm going to show you a new embossing pattern that I found that is super fun, but first we have to get our greeting ready. Now I know many of you freak out when I cut up my stamps. However, I promise they don't scream, at least not loud enough for us to hear, so I encourage you to try it. I'm just cutting between the images, so I'm not harming any of my images, and I can always come back and mount them on my acrylic block how they were originally intended. So see, I can put these pieces back together, and we can have the stamp how it was intended to be. This is an awesome stamp from Neat and Tangled. I love this greeting, but I wanted to make my own flowers, so I didn't want the flowers that were on the image. So now I can get a completely different look out of it, and I plan to use it how it was intended in the future, and I can always go back and do that. And also, I can just use the flowers on a card too. I could leave the greeting out. So by cutting up your stamps, you're not hurting them, you're actually getting more ways to use them. If you really don't want to cut up your stamps, you could just use some masking and creatively ink just part of the image and get the same look. Okay, so now it's time to do the embossing. I have my anti-static powder tool that I'm going to brush over the surface first to prevent any powder from sticking where we don't want it. Now I'm going to stamp this with Versamark ink, and I'm going to use a new embossing powder that I found. It's an ultra-high embossing powder from Wow. I love this powder because it ends up resulting in an embossed image that's very raised. Now you can see these granules are very big compared to other embossing powders. So I'm putting them on carefully. I'm making sure that it gets on as much of the ink as possible and just gently tapping it off because I don't want to tap too hard or these big pieces will come right off. Now you'll look, it looks kind of hairy and you got all those big granules. I wouldn't recommend this with a super detailed image, but this message is perfect for it. Now I'm going to heat it up first from behind so as not to blow the powder off, and then heat it off, finish it off on the front. So you can see what a great raised look you get with this embossing powder. I think it is just beautiful and great for any kind of bold greeting or large image that you may have. I think it'd be great on a background too. I just love how it looks. Now I know a lot of people are going to want to know how this compares to other regular embossing powders. So I'm going to show you a comparison real quick before we move on. This is my favorite Ranger liquid platinum embossing powder. I love this stuff. It's great for fine details and I use it quite often. And it's perfect. I think it's great. But look, you get a completely different look. With the bottom one, it's very smooth and very detailed and even. And with the one on the top for this card, it's raised and has a lot of dimension to it. It's almost like it's bubbled up. And I think they're both great. They're not in to replace each other. They're just two different options that I'm going to use from time to time. And I just love that rounded silver look you get with this powder. Okay, so now it's time to add the sequins here. Now I'm going to show you two methods that I found work really well for adding sequins. For the first one, I'm going to use a tool called the Quick Sticks. This actually is an older version of it, but it's the same thing. It's got a sticky end and a pointy end. For both methods, I'm going to use the only adhesive that I've ever found that holds sequins really well and through the mail. It is the Ranger Medium Matte. I like the matte finish of it, and it's super duper strong. So I use this adhesive a lot now. It's very easy. It doesn't get clogged. So I have some large sequins here that I just found in my stash, and I'm going to put these on the bottom and I'm going to layer some on top. So here's the first method. You use this Quick Sticks that has this little sticky end. It's almost like a gum, and you just pick up the sequin, dip it into some of that adhesive, and then put it onto your card. So I squirted some of that adhesive onto my work surface, and I just kind of smeared it around so that I could get a thin layer of it, and that way I could easily put my sequin into it. I find the method of using this tool and this adhesive works really well. Okay, now, before we use it some more, I wanted to show you how you can color and change the look of your sequins. Now, I'm actually going to be coloring on the back side of the sequins, and you'll see why in a moment. But the best way to color sequins is to take a Copic marker or any kind of permanent marker like a Sharpie and just dab it onto the sequin, and it puts color onto it. If you scribble back and forth, it doesn't put it on as heavy. But by dabbing pretty tough here, you are able to get lots of color on the sequins. Then you just need to let it sit and dry. So I'm going to let those sit and dry for a bit. Now that my other sequins are glued onto my background and are on there permanently, I'm going to go ahead and add a slightly smaller pink sequin to the center. These sequins are from Pretty Pink Posh. I just think they have great selection in a bunch of different sizes. And I love the look of layering sequins on top of each other. And I'm going to make little flowers here. Now these tiny little yellow ones are also from Pretty Pink Posh. I love these tiny sequins. I've never seen them this small before, and these are going to go in the center of the others. Now I will give you a tip. It helps when layering sequins to let each layer dry, or the layer underneath will move as you try to put one on top. I didn't do that here, but I highly recommend it. It doesn't take that long to dry. It just makes it a lot easier. Okay, now we're going to go back to the green sequins. They've dried enough so I can touch them, and I'm just going to cut them into little leaf shapes. Now, if you wanted a more vibrant color, you could go back and add another coat of the marker on top of it once it's dry. You can just do 2 coats of it. Again, you could use Sharpies if you don't have Copic markers. So once I've cut these into little leaf shapes, I thought the little sequin leaves would be fun with the sequin flowers. I'm going to go ahead and glue them kind of tucked behind my flowers. So instead of using my little tool, since these are upside down, I'm actually going to take the sequins, these little leaf sequins that I've created, and scoop some adhesive behind them, because remember it's kind of raised up in the center. So I've scooped a little bit of the adhesive behind it, and I'm tucking them underneath the little flower sequins that I've created, just to make sure there's enough adhesive behind there. You could also just squirt some adhesive right onto your card and then lay the leaves into it if you wanted to. Now, I know a lot of people use mini glue dots for sequins, but I do know from personal experience those pop off in the mail sometimes. So I like to use this adhesive. And last but not least, I scattered a few of the tiny little yellow sequins on the back of the card. So that's one method for adding sequins, using your Quick Sticks tool to pick up a sequin and kind of drag it in some of the multi-matte medium and adding it to your card. Now the second way of doing it is just a little bit different, it uses a few of the same things. I'm using the same adhesive again, but I'm putting tiny little dots of it onto my card. So where I want the sequins to end up, you can either use your fingers to pick up the sequins, or the other tool that is awesome with sequins are these tweezers that from EK Success that kind of clamp onto your sequin to pick it up, and you just take it over and then release the sequin or the tweezers, and it leaves the sequin behind. It really just depends on which is easier for you. You can try both of them out. If you have tweezers, you can try ones that you already have, but I really like these because they clamp on and they have that fine little point. You could also use the point of the tweezers to kind of move the sequins around once you have them in place. So I've put down my first layer here. I'm going to pick up the sequins with the tweezers, put them right in the center of the flower. You can see I'm using the point to kind of move it around and put it in the perfect position. So anyways, both methods use the same adhesive, the multi-medium, but it just depends on which tool is easier to use. But if you have another method that works for you, go for it. I just wanted to show you fun ways to layer some sequins and also to create little leaves. Now, one of the things I don't like about sequins is that there's that little hole showing in the center. It just doesn't look finished to me. So what I like to do is put little gems in the center. These gems are from Hero Arts, and these tiny little ones are so perfect for the center of sequins. So I think it just gives a fun finishing touch, especially to these little flowers. And there's a ton of those gems in the package. You just use a craft knife to cut them apart. They're all connected by adhesive, and you just cut them apart with the craft knife. Okay, so now I wanted to finish this card off. I wanted to add a sentiment to the inside, so I have this new sentiment set from Simon Says Stamp. There's lots of cursive greetings here, and I thought it kind of went with the sentiment that I used on the front of the card. So I'm just going to stamp it with a matching pink ink to the center. Very quick and easy to do. I just think there's something nice about having a sentiment on the inside of the card too. So there you have lots of ideas. First we did the shape cards using border dies. Then I shared 2 different methods for adding sequins, and I layered up the sequins to create flowers. I colored some sequins to create leaves. Lots of fun things here. If you are interested in these products, I have all of it listed below and linked below in my YouTube description. I have a few different store options there. Also, you can head over to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com, where I have much more information and links to some other projects. Thanks so much for watching.